Hello everyone, my name is Kendall Kendrick. I am a nutritional therapy practitioner and I want to welcome you to this live video today on the Nutritional Therapy Association page. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you to the Nutritional Therapy Association for allowing me this opportunity to hang out with you guys today. I also want to say thank you for coming by and spending your time with me, and hopefully we'll have a fun conversation. So if you're here, you could just in the comments let me know where you are messaging from, where you're watching from. I am in Charlotte, North Carolina this afternoon, so it's about 3 o'clock for me. So if maybe you're watching from Australia or watching somewhere else, I'd love to know if you're in a different time zone. That would be kind of fun, maybe what you're doing right now. So I'll just start first by saying that I'm always a little weird with video. I've been in radio and voiceover since I was 17, so I get really freaked out when there is a camera to look into. Microphone, no problem. I never know what to do with my hands, or if I'm smiling too much, or what to do with my eyes. So if I'm overly weird, please forgive me now. I'm a speaker naturally and not easily in front of video. So my story is that I grew up partly as a child on my grandparents' farm in Central Florida. They lived in the strawberry capital called Plant City. If any of you have ever heard of that small little town, they have a big strawberry festival in March every year. And I spent a lot of time on their farm as a child, but also lived in a nearby city. So kind of had the best of both worlds growing up. My grandparents were fifth generation Floridians and farmers, and many of my ancestors come from Ireland, Scotland, and England, and came to America as farmers. So there is just something in my blood about farming and nutrition and understanding how our ancestors ate. However, none of that translated into the way that I ate or lived as a child. I was incredibly unhealthy. I had so many allergies. I had that awful scratch test and blood testing done as a young child. Found out that I was allergic to corn and dairy, and didn't really go off of those things. It was the 1980s, and it was very difficult to find substitutes. So I was already this really just lanky, sickly kid on antibiotics all the time. So I very much struggled with my health, and I ate tons and tons of sugar growing up. Although I would go out to this farm where cows were raised and there were vegetables, and I, had this understanding that that's how they ate, even though they were my grandparents, and how my father had grown up eating that's not what my life as a child was. But I did have these incredible memories that were created of spending evenings walking out to feed the cows and to put them up at night with my grandfather. And I guess that those things really imprinted on me, and eventually as an adult, when I came back to that part of my life, I was able to really, really feel that deep connection to the soil and the earth and the importance of what our food looks like and how we eat. Now, so fast forward, like I said earlier, I got into radio at 17, right out of high school, continued to live this really, really unhealthy lifestyle. I was always struggling with a lot of mental health issues. I was just, plagued by ADHD, not knowing, I wasn't medicated or anything. I drank a ton of soda. I still today, when I think about the amount of high fructose corn syrup that I put into my body in my all of my teens and my early 20s, until I kind of found what health and optimal health looked like. So I ate fast food probably 3 times a day, especially those years in radio. I was working a morning show for a while. So I was just living this kind of rock star life and being out in bars all night. And so one part of my story is that I struggled with drug addiction. And when I got clean, I was actually 21 years old. I hit quite a bottom. So for a long time, it wasn't just about eating unhealthy. It was also about all of these chemicals that I was putting into my body, and just what a difficult time I was having in life. So fast forward a few years after sobriety, the first time for me, I got pregnant with my first daughter. That was 16 years ago. And back to this connection piece for me, there was something always inside of me that connected to our ancestral selves. When I was little, I would go to Miami where my grandmother lived, and she would have these piles of National Geographic magazines, and I would just pour through them looking for the tribal women. And although I didn't look like them, I didn't really understand why I felt so connected to them. As a really little girl, there was this deep longing to understand them and to know them and to want to know how they lived and where they lived. And so when I was in my early 20s, before I was really even considering having children and wasn't married or anything, I understood that I wanted to have a home birth. And this is in early 2000s, so it wasn't quite as popular having a birth with midwives is now. And so I decided when I was pregnant that I was going to do this, and I started to connect with other women who had had home births in my area and started figuring out what the process would look like. And so very late into my pregnancy, I finally made the switch from seeing a traditional OB to a home birth midwife. And when I met her, her very first concern was the nutrition in my diet. What was I eating? And she made me keep, a food journal for a few days. And when she looked at it, she said, if you want to have a home birth, you have to change everything. We're not going to deliver at home if you can't clean up your diet. So I was barely 24 years old. I had eaten unwell my entire life. I had this family history of diabetes behind me. And so that was my first step into this current life of how I eat and how I live today. That started 16 years ago, and I'll tell you, it's just consistently evolving. It's always sort of shifting and new ideas, especially, I was 24 then, I'm 40 now. So there's this long period of time. I've been raising 4 girls now. I have, a lot of different ideas than I did. And so I went through some periods where I thought being a vegetarian would be ideal. There was a short window of being vegan that ended up leading me to having influenza and pneumonia and getting very, very sick, and deciding at that point that perhaps vegetarianism or veganism was just not sustainable for me personally. After that point, some interesting things happened in our family that started to lead me in the direction where I eventually found NTA and started my process of becoming an NTP. My twins, who are now nearly 13, the youngest twin developed asthma. My ex-husband and I were going through a divorce when the twins were 2 years old. It was an incredibly stressful time in our lives. And the one twin she caught the flu and ended up with asthma that never went away. So she coughed for 4 years straight. And I did everything that I could possibly do in the natural realm that I knew at the time, homeopathy and herbs and all sorts of things. And then I was so desperate because she was so sick that we went ahead and did the medical route where we were doing the nebulizers and all of that. And that wasn't working, and she was getting worse. And so then I found a naturopathic doctor who ran some food sensitivity testing, and we went ahead and removed some foods that look like what we might call inflammatory foods today. So we removed gluten from her diet, we removed dairy, it showed that she couldn't tolerate rice. There were so many foods that really do fall into that category. If we were working with someone with autoimmunity today or inflammatory issues, we would say, let's remove those. Miraculously, the asthma disappeared within 1 to 2 weeks. I think she had a couple of more days of coughing, and it never came back. So that was like my first, okay, wow, this really, really works. And then our whole family, kind of to support her as being this, she was 6 years old at the time. So to support her in this, we said, let's all go gluten-free at our house. Let's go ahead and just support her when she's here at our house. So I started noticing some differences and, feeling a little bit better myself. Not totally different. I was still struggling. I had a pregnancy loss just the summer before, and I was having severe anemia issues from that. So things weren't totally great for me, but I could see a little bit of a difference. And the daughter who had the asthma, she has a twin sister who was diagnosed around that same time with sensory processing disorder, which would later be also diagnosed with Asperger's and high functioning autism. And so I thought, well, maybe this gluten-free thing would be great for her too, because I had heard that, the autism community was using this gluten-free, casein-free diet to try to improve some of the symptoms that tend to go along on the autism spectrum. So I started seeing some improvement with her. So that's been quite a while now. And not long after that, I actually found sort of the template of the way that I eat now, which is essentially grain-free. I eat high protein, high fat, and the carbohydrates that work for my system. And when I started eating that way, all of a sudden, I wasn't anemic for the first time ever in my life. When I started really sticking to knowing, I can't eat those things that I was allergic to growing up and I'm still allergic to, like cheese, which is so amazing, but it doesn't work for me. Raw cheese or cheese definitely causes issues. I can't eat corn. Well, I can eat it, but there's always going to be fallout and it's going to cause inflammation. So I made this commitment. It's been 6 years now. I made this commitment to really focus on this template. And I was so amazed and shocked at my results of how wonderful I felt, and that I lost the fat that I had wanted to lose after having so many babies in such a short amount of time, that I decided to start a blog called Primal Balance. And really, the blog has evolved, but the premise of it is no different. I wanted to understand what our connection to our hunter-gatherer ancestors was, this primal piece, but I wanted to find balance with our modern day, kind of mismatched lives that we lead now. I wanted to know, how could we take these things that we see worked really well for our hunter-gatherer ancestors, or maybe even our ancestors, let's say 200 years ago, maybe my grandparents, wanted to see how could we take some of those things and shift it into this very technological, modern, sort of crazy, stressed out world. And like I said earlier, when we first began, I've always struggled with my mental health, with feeling balanced, with my focus issues, with just feeling peace wasn't something. It's one of the reasons that I was so deep into addiction at a young age. There was just a lot of escape for me. And even though I have been off of drugs for a very long time, there came a time where, I used wine as a way to self-medicate. I'll use binge watching TV as a way to self-medicate. So I talk about that a lot in my work, because I don't think you have to be an addict per se to self-medicate. I think that a part of it is that we live in this modern day world that can feel very overwhelming and very stressful, and a big part of that is because we are so disconnected from our ancestors, from our evolutionary makeup. And so I started that blog, and I found out kind of quickly that I wanted to learn more about the science behind nutrition. I wanted to be able to share things from a more professional aspect. And so within about a year of having that blog, I decided that I wanted to go into some sort of nutritional program. I started looking up the options of going to school, but I didn't go to college. Right out of high school, I went right into radio. So I never had the college experience. And at this point, in my mid-30s with 4 very young children, 1 special needs, I did not see going back to college for many, many years to become, have a master's in nutrition or a registered dietitian. I just didn't see that as a possibility. So I started to look into programs that might offer something where I could do most of the program from home and I could learn what I needed to learn. And I was kind of coming up short, having a hard time figuring out where I could go, what education would be good for me. And I was listening to the Balance Bites podcast one day with Liz Wolf. I'm sure most of you know Liz, who is just an amazing NTP. And I say this all the time, but she's my girl crush. And so I was listening to Liz and her Balance Bites partner, Diane Sanfilippo, and I had the opportunity to, really listen to them for a while and learn so much from them. And they were going over different nutrition schools. And so Liz brought up Nutritional Therapy Association, and she was kind of explaining the premise of it. And I thought, this is it. This is the program for me. I understood that I could, do this program from home in about 9 months, and then I could travel a little bit in it and go be in a classroom setting. And I thought, well, that was really cool because, I have 4 kids at home. So a little break, even if it's school, it's a little bit of a vacation, right? You moms out there know what I'm saying. And I could continue. At that time, I was still doing voiceover full time, so I could continue to run my business and I could balance these things. And I love the idea of this. And I can tell you that the number one reason, on top of all of that I did choose NTA is because of the ancestral piece, the connection, the understanding of Weston A. Price's research and studies. That was it for me. Like before, I wanted to understand this connection between our past and our present, and especially our future. And NTA gave that to me. It was an incredible education. And, I want to add that for people who may have struggled in school like I did, if you had learning disorders like I did, that were undiagnosed and untreated, I want to tell you that NTA is an incredibly supportive environment that will help you get through those things. I was going through a great deal of life stuff when I was in school. My grandfather passed away a weekend before midterms. There was just so much going on. And so on top of all of that, I had these just beautifully smart women, and our one guy, Jim, from our class, who we all dearly loved. But I had these women who were just so smart and studying so hard and able to really get this stuff. And I personally struggled with it because of my past history with school and the way that I learned. And my teacher was Caroline Behringer, and I saw her say hi earlier, and I just love Caroline so much. She was just such a rock for me. Every time something would come up, I could just go to her, and she helped me get through it and helped me, finish the program. And yeah, I mean, it's such a supportive community, and I know the community so well now. I graduated almost 4 years ago, so I've had this opportunity to just connect with so many NTPs and NTCs. I was so honored to get to present at the conference, the annual conference last year, with my other company, Evolved Recovery, my business partner, Susan McCauley. We got to present about addiction recovery. So yeah, so and the venue that I went to was the Hartford, Connecticut venue, and there are so many incredible venues, US, Canada, Australia. I know we've got Leanne here. If you want to just go ahead and check out when we're done here, nutritionaltherapy.com, and then if you're in the Australia area, ntaaustralia.com.au. So yeah, my experience was incredible. I found it as a mother of 4, and I forgot to mention that at the same exact time that I started the program in the fall 4 years ago, I was offered a position to work in local food policy. That was my dream, to be able to bring a farm to school program into the school district here in Charlotte. And Charlotte, North Carolina has one of the largest districts of the country. And so there were so many incredible barriers to overcome to try to figure out how to get local food into schools. So that position came up right when I started this program, and I was a little concerned, like, how will I balance this all? But it really actually was quite manageable, and I was able to go about and do all of my tasks. So if you are thinking that perhaps, you know, you want to go through the NTA or the NTP program, that's definitely something that you can talk to kind of any NTP or NTC and decide which one of those would be best for you. And as far as traveling goes, finding a program near you, or do you want more of a little vacation and you want to travel farther away? You have absolutely all of those options. So I'm thinking of the few years since I graduated from the program and how the program has affected myself and my family, just huge ways. I can't imagine now not having this education. We are an incredibly healthy family. I teach once a week at a local addiction outpatient treatment center. And I was just telling my students yesterday, I was just talking about this importance of learning about optimal health and what feeds your body and what feeds your soul, honestly, and how it's just changed my family's health. And when my daughter with Asperger's hit a deep bottom just a year and a half ago with severe acid reflux, she was living in 2 homes, so I didn't have control over what she ate outside of my house, and she was really suffering. And I was able to just, you know, say to her, you know, mommy's told you what the things that are going to help heal your body, and when you're ready, you can work on those things. And man, you know, she was in enough pain after an endoscopy and on the purple pills, you know, that many of us know are just a Band-Aid. She was able to go full-time, gluten-free, casein-free, and oh wow, talk about healing. She became a totally different kid. She went from crying and telling me she didn't think she'd ever feel okay again to just being this incredible little rock star that I'm so crazy about. And she's so happy, and she's so healthy. So I feel like without this program, our family probably wouldn't be in the place that we're in now. So I have an incredible amount of gratitude for the education that I got. Yeah, and so now I work mostly in the platform of stress management. That's kind of my favorite thing that I like to talk about. And I say that because I came into this idea of optimal health and healing our lifestyles and our health and reconnecting to our ancestors. I came into it as an absolute tornado, a hurricane. I mean, I was the opposite of stress managed. And I think that that's partly why I named the blog Primal Balance, because I had no concept of balance. I had no concept of how to be peaceful and happy. And when I met my husband now a decade ago, he used to tell me the story about Bruce Lee, how, you know, he would be like water. That's how he beat his opponents. And I just thought that was crazy. That was ludicrous to me to think about being like water and going with the flow. I'd just been this fiery, full of, you know, yeah, just I won't say the word that my mother would probably call me, but I had a really quick temper, and I had a very hard time not reacting to situations. And now I'm in an incredibly different place, and I have so much gratitude for that. And it really does go back to the food, even though most of my practice now is focused on mindfulness and meditation and stress management. The food piece, I know for a fact, is what allowed me to heal the rest of the imbalances. And when we eat appropriately for our bodies, it heals these pathways that open us up to learn how to be peaceful, to learn how to sit down and breathe for 5 minutes and work on our thoughts. And, you know, these things that some of us believe we're completely incapable of. It's amazing what we find out we are actually capable of. Truthfully, we just don't give ourselves enough credit. And so putting these healing foods into our bodies that we learned so much about in, the NTA program, and then moving into these next pieces that we also learned about in the program, this crucial idea of sleep. It's so important to get your sleep dialed in, and that's one of those things that I just impress upon everybody that I'm working with or talking to. And then the movement component, for me, the movement, the play, the working out, whatever that looks like, the walking, all of that really goes hand in hand with my nutrition. If one's off, usually the other is off. So I try to keep those kind of wrapped in a nice place with each other. It helps a lot, keeps that accountability going. Because if I'm eating well, I want to move my body. And if I'm moving my body, I want to keep eating well. Let's see. So I'm trying to think of the kind of other components, stress management and mindfulness, and just really being able to live life on life's terms. That's kind of a slogan, maybe a cliche we hear a lot for those of us in addiction recovery, but it is honestly true. Just taking what comes at you and not letting it completely knock you down. And perhaps I have a perspective on that. I did have a near-death experience nearly 7 years ago during a miscarriage, and I was within seconds of losing my life. And so that wake-up call and that miscarriage was caused by stress. So that wake-up call for me, that did lead me just, a couple of years later to follow this dream of nutritional therapy. All of that gave me this second chance, and I just knew that I had wasted so much of my time being angry and resentful and stressed out and a drama addict, just a total drama addict, and I didn't want to live like that anymore. So I made this decision over time to get the help that I needed and therapy and work on my nutrition. And now it looks like just a mindfulness practice that I'm very committed to because I know how it makes me feel, eating the foods that don't inflame my body, and really managing that stress. And what that also looks like is a great deal of self-care. There was a time in my life where I disliked myself very much. I think actually self-loathing is probably not even quite the word to express what I felt about myself, and the level of my addiction would certainly represent that. And today I can tell you that I do love myself so absolutely very much, and I can forgive myself for the things that addiction drove me to and some of the behaviors in my life that I used to continue a shame cycle with and perfectionism. And now I know for a fact that self-care is the journey to self-love. And it is so absolutely crucial for us to take care of ourselves, especially for those of us who are women. It hands down, there is no thing that we need to do today that is more important than taking care of ourselves. So that's really what I'm specializing in and teaching now, and the food is this big component of that, because I think when we're putting foods that stress our body out into our system, then we're having a hard time probably managing that stress management. For me, if I eat those inflammatory foods, it's totally sugar. I am such a sugar addict, and so the sugar is a huge problem for me, and I know the stress that it creates on me. So I work a lot in the Ancestral Health Community. Some of you from that community may be here now, also known as the Paleo Community. We have different things that we're called, and I've had the incredible chance to present at Paleo FX and the Ancestral Health Symposium, and like I said, as well as the NTA conference. So that's been pretty incredible to get to have those opportunities to just meet thought leaders in all of these worlds, and to really connect with people who are so excited about our healing journeys. I am currently working on 2 books, which seems a little bit crazy to me. Maybe trying not to be a perfectionist or overachiever, but I am working on actually putting out a story of the transcripts of my podcast, which some of you may have heard of, called Born Primal Conversations with the Ancestral Health Community. So I'm taking my favorite conversations from the podcast and I'm translating them into a book and creating a story out of that. So I'm hoping that will be out in a couple of months. And I'm also writing my memoir. So by the end of 2017, that will be released, and sharing the story of that life of growing up with some early ancestral connection and not quite understanding it, and moving through addiction and being able to come back to that long journey home of connecting to my own personal ancestors and living a deep connection within ancestral life balanced with modern day life today. And I am so sad that I will not be making it to the conference this year. So I have to go on some out-of-town field trips with teenagers for school. Life of a mom. I have to keep my traveling down some now. So I guess at this point, I'll see if anybody has any questions, anything. Trying to think of anything that maybe I've left out here. One of the things that I definitely get asked a lot when I'm working with groups, I don't work as much anymore with individual folks, but I do love working in group environments. And mainly I love to speak and be in front of audiences and share different information. But definitely the self-care and the stress management comes up. I see it consistently with women who are overworking themselves and have these incredible expectations of what we're supposed to be as women, you know, of what the world expects of us. We're supposed to do it all. We're supposed to be mothers, and we're supposed to have jobs, and we are supposed to volunteer and do all of these things. And, you know, we are not tribes anymore. It is impossible to do it all. And our ancestors never did it all. They were a community of people who were relevant in, in their each individual responsibilities within that tribe. And they came together to create this sort of well-oiled machine. And now we're expected to live in boxes and drive boxes and work in boxes and raise families on our own without the tribe, or, you know, maybe even if we don't have children, just living life without a tribe. It is so isolating. And that's one of the things that I'm moving into now, is really studying more about the connection with tribes and ancestors and what role that really plays in our absolute happiness and feeling connected. It's so incredibly important. So I think that when I look at stress management, it is about those things that I mentioned earlier, that it's about the food and the digestion, which digestion is still my favorite takeaway from the NTA program. I always have to talk about the digestion, because I do think that it's just such an important piece that we have to be able to sit down and calm down before we eat our food. And actually had one of the therapists at the treatment center I work at, one of our clients actually told him that I said, you have to wait a long time in between your bites and put your fork down. So he said this was all news to him, and now he's having to work really hard to be able to do that. So I was very excited that that was the message that got translated from one of my clients back to one of our therapists. So I believe that those are two crucial pieces, in the movement and the sleep. But really, I think that as a whole, as a world that maybe is going through some tough transitional times right now, if we could look into our own connection here, our own reason for being here, and our connection to the people who came before us, and what did they eat, how did they live their lives, and how can we incorporate that into our modern day lives. That's where I have found my absolute peace and my happiness. Now, for me, I know I talk about this a lot, but I have a fire all the time in my backyard. Like, that's just, my father is the same way, my grandfather was the same way. It's just like a really natural stress reduction action for me, is to go sit in front of a fire. And I have a list of self-care items that I perform regularly. That includes Epsom salt baths. I go to the sauna at my gym several times a week. I definitely, go for walks, and I meditate, which I mentioned. I use essential oils to help me. There's so many options into how we can take care of ourselves and really learn how to manage our stress. And honestly, it's about seeing like what is worth it. What's really worth it today? Is it worth it getting upset in traffic? Is it worth it that you didn't do this thing perfectly in the way that you thought you were supposed to? Those are the those are the things that help me stay sort of on my map, so to speak, as you would say in yoga, just like right here, focusing on what is important and what isn't. So so does anybody have any questions? I want to make sure I didn't miss any earlier. And anything else? Anybody have anything to add, or that you would like to know more about the NTA program? Hopefully I am getting these. I told you guys that I struggle with the video here. Is anybody going to the conference? I'm gonna be so disappointed that I won't get to be there with all of you this year and to see you there. All right. Well, I think that is about it. So, and I'm sorry if I missed your questions, because I'm not totally sure that my comments are working here. But yeah, so again, if you want to find out more about the program, you can go to nutritionaltherapy.com and make sure and tell them that Kendall sent you. And you can also check out ntaaustralia.com.au if you're in Australia or New Zealand. And I just had such a pleasure getting to share my story with you guys and talk to you. And I'd love to see you over on my website, primal-balance.com. If you're on Instagram, please come follow me at Primal Balance Kendall. And I have 75 plus really fun episodes of the Born Primal Show, conversations with the Ancestral Health Community. So if you'd like to know more about this whole ancestral thing I'm talking about and this connection to how our ancestors ate and lived, I have had the honor to invite some of the top researchers in the ancestral health field and have conversations with them about how all of this works. So good luck in your journeys. I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of your week, and be well.